Historians, it's Miss Melton here to talk to you about the 15th Amendment. Let's begin by looking at the Pearson textbook. The 15th Amendment, passed by Congress in 1869 and approved by the states in February 1870, gave all male citizens the right to vote without regard to race. It was a big step forward for formerly enslaved African Americans. Before being allowed back into the Union, former Confederate states had to accept all three amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Eventually, all did. By July 15th, 1870, all the former Confederate states had been allowed back into the Union. So think about from the time the Civil War ended in April of 1865 until all the states came back into the Union, 1870. So it took 5 years, a little bit more than 5 years, for the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment legislation to pass and for all the states to write their new government um, constitutions and to be let back into the Union. Now let's look at the Scott Forsman text. The 15th Amendment, ratified in March 1870, gave all male citizens the right to vote. It stated, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude or slavery." So this is saying that you can't, no one is allowed to tell you you can't vote based on your race, color, or if you were formerly a slave. And race is the color of your skin, African American, Caucasian, Asian. You can't be denied the right to vote because of those reasons. Sojourner Truth pointed out that a woman had a right to vote just as much as a man, but the 15th Amendment did not give voting rights to women. This angered many women who fought for abolition and thought women, as well as African Americans, should have the right to vote. Now, it's interesting to note that President Johnson opposed the 14th Amendment and other Reconstruction laws. He believed that the Reconstruction Acts were unlawful because they were passed without the representation of Southern states in Congress. Because remember, the Southern states were not part of Congress because they were not part of the Union again until after they had ratified these amendments already. So President Johnson thought it wasn't fair that the South had to agree to these laws without ever being a part of making them. He tried to block the passage of several laws that granted further rights to African Americans. Now let's look at Mr. Nussbaum's website about the 15th Amendment. This is a state of Louisiana, parish of Jefferson. Jim Crow's laws, such as the poll tax above, were legally passed in the South as a result of the 15th Amendment of the United States Constitution. So the 15th Amendment said you cannot be denied based on the color of your skin, but it didn't say that it was free. So now certain states would put a poll tax saying you had to pay a tax before you could vote. And remember, a lot of former slaves didn't even know how to read. So would they understand what the document said for them to be able to pay? Let's see, what does the 15th Amendment actually say? So there's two sections. Section 1, the right of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The Section 2, Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So what does it mean? The 15th Amendment prohibits states from denying individuals the right to vote based on race, color, or because they were former slaves. The 15th Amendment, however, failed to restrict states from setting voting qualifications. This led to Jim Crow laws such as poll taxes and various voting tests, which legally and effectively prohibited most African Americans from voting. Now, looking at your cause and effect chart, you would have the 15th Amendment, and the biggest thing was that all men were allowed to vote, no matter if they were former slaves or the color of their skin. You might also want to put in effect is that certain states started using Jim Crow laws prohibiting African Americans from voting in other ways, other than just saying you can't vote because of your skin color. This has been Miss Melton.